filming, and he says, "Don't use the pipes from the lead foundry. Those people are not right down there."
Don't use the
And
pipes from what? Don't use the pipes
from the lead foundry.
Yeah. What's that?
And he says it's a foundry where they form pipes out of lead.
Okay.
Okay,
And-
we're
And
going live. Okay.
those people were not right in the head. And it took us till the mid 70s to outlaw lead in pipes.
Wow.
And he knew that BC. Well, he didn't have scientific evidence. He just had anecdotal evidence, but still.
That's kind of interesting, like the idea of metaphorical truth. I don't know if you've heard, I think Jordan Peterson, Brett Weinstein talk about it a little bit, but like the idea that something is useful, like for example, when it came to malaria, we used to think it was caused by bad air, right? We didn't realize it was mosquitoes causing it. We thought it was bad air causing it. And so people would stop going outside because they'd say, oh, the air is bad, and that protected them. But they didn't realize what the real reason was. And there's another example he gives. People used to brush their teeth because they would think that they had tooth worms. They would think that there were worms in your teeth, and that if you brushed your teeth, it would get rid of the worms. That's not really what's happening, but it's making you healthy for a different reason. So there's actually a whole bunch of different examples. Like during the Black Plague, the Jews used to wash their hands, right? And they said, like, you know, that they were doing it, you know, because it says in the Bible, but the act of washing your hands is what prevented them from getting affected by the Black Plague as much. Hey, Natasha.
Hey, Natasha, welcome.
I'm
Did
late.
they actually?
I rallied.
Awesome, Natasha. You have been able to overcome your weaknesses as a person and the tiredness, and you are here to speak the
Yes.
truth about life in the universe. That is great.
Right. Exactly.
Or just chill and talk nonsense, like me. If you're me, like if you're you're here to talk the truth about the universe, probably.
No, I don't think so. I think I make it up a lot on the spot.
I'm gonna get some coffee. I'm feeling a little bit tired too.
What did I miss? What did the topic end up being?
Not much. We don't even have a topic tonight. I'm sorry. I'm a terrible host tonight. I don't even have a topic. I'm not prepared. I'm just talking about whatever comes to mind.
It's hard to come up with a good topic. Do you have any ideas, Natasha?
I'm gonna get some coffee in the meantime.
Do you have any ideas? No, I don't. I'm not a generator. I'm not an idea person.
Perseverance landed this week.
The what?
The Perseverance, the robot on Mars.
The Mars thing.
And it's definitely the most sophisticated robot we've ever sent. And
Well, good.
And it has a little helicopter, a little drone that scouts out ahead.
I was amazed to hear that it only takes like 7 months for it to get there.
Yeah, or
I
something.
thought it would be way longer than that.
I know it's variable depending on orbits and all of that, but you know what amazes me is I hesitate to say all the experiments, but I don't hesitate to say most of the scientific equipment on the rover is directed at detecting ancient life or possibly extant life, you know,
Okay.
not multicellular creatures, but, you know, at least microbes, bacteria, that kind of thing. And we put a lot of money into that.
I wonder, like, are they just trying to dig it up and bring it back, or is the robot actually able to send analyze data back?
Both. It's going to dig up samples and analyze them, but it's also going to leave samples in sterile containers to be picked up by a future mission that's not funded yet to pick them up.
So there's no return intention for this.
There's a return planned, but there's no money. The money has not been assigned to it yet.
Okay.
Well,
Okay.
it's typical of NASA to make plans before they have the money,
Right.
because they use the plan to get the money.
Okay.
You know, to sell the people who decide how to spend the money, what's
Right.
worth spending money on.
Right.
You don't want to go and say, we don't have a plan.
Yeah. I remember watching.
Like, oh, what?
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I remember watching a podcast where this one guy was talking about how you want less transparency in science funding, not more transparency. Because he said when you have a lot of transparency, it's like you have to prove to the public immediately why it's going to benefit them or they won't fund it. Whereas in science, it takes a while for a good idea to develop. And you can't always it can't be the benefit can't be immediate all the time.
Well,
Sure.
the other side of that, I'm not saying that doesn't have merit, but the other side of that is, you know, if a university or a think tank that's funded by the government, if they do research, I think that, and they're funded with taxpayer dollars, I think it's a little iffy to charge people to see the results of their work. You know what I'm saying? In other
Yeah.
words, we already paid for you to do the work, and
Right.
now you're going to charge us to see it?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That doesn't
Yeah.
sound right to me.
Well,
I
I
wasn't
think
aware of that at all. That's
in
paying
fact,
for it twice is kind of weird.
that's why that guy killed himself. I can't remember his name. 4 or 5 years ago, he was a young. He worked at a university, and the university was charging people to see the results of research that the government had paid for. And he was trying to convince people that that was not the right thing to do. And he killed himself to bring attention to the cause, which is a little
How does that help?
extreme.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a little extreme. Well, I heard about it. You guys didn't, but I did. Yeah.
That's
There were probably other reasons.
You think
that
he could have settled for public exposure or
Yeah.
with like a big sign or
Yeah.
and just a few years.
I'm sure there were some other reasons that we're not privy to.
Probably. Huh. I don't
Yeah,
know. I mean, I'm wary to say that that's definitely wrong because you're assuming in the first place that they're paid a good wage to do the research. I don't know. It seems like, if they actually, if they didn't have the incentive for that extra prize at the end, then it could be said that they could trump up less valuable things to study. They could just study whatever they want rather than something that provides a service, a desirable result. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So in that way, it kind of makes sense that it incentivizes scientists to study things that help somebody, that furthers somebody's vision for whatever field it is, industry, health, all that kind of stuff. So I mean, I don't know if there are any kind of caps on how much you can charge, but I don't know. I find it hard to I guess if they can get the funding for it in the first place.
Well, to me,
But
as a principle, if the public funds some research, the public should get the benefits of the knowledge.
right.
You shouldn't sell it to them again.
But what motivates scientists to work on it to completion if it means they lose that wage at the end
Now,
because they've completed it?
My understanding is that most scientists toil in obscurity. We have never heard of them. And so it's just like, it's similar to acting as a career. 99% of all the people who wish to make a living acting, we have never heard of.
Right.
And they make very little money.
Mm-hmm.
So the people who are extraordinarily popular make all of the money.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
And I was trying to connect them, but in other words, most actors are obscure. Most scientists are obscure.
The thing is, you need 100 scientists that fail at a problem in order to get one scientist to succeed at it. So, yeah.
That sounds like a light bulb joke.
Now, the thing is,
well, yeah, that's unlike acting.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I just think, again, like, okay, so as someone who has like a lot of fine arts friends, and it's if the majority of the time you're going to be paid very little, that opportunity at the end is, a motivator, rather than doing a bunch of work for pennies that when you finish, it just disappears. And then you have to find like another job and you have to write another grant and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know. I don't know if it's necessarily immoral to have to pay extra for a finished product.
Now, most of the scientists that I know, but it's not a statistical sample, but it's not a valid statistical sample. But most of the scientists that I know, they're not in it for the money.
Mm-hmm.
They're in it for the knowledge. And
sure.
now they have to have some money to live off
Mm-hmm.
of, but like I know some guys that work at it's a biological station south of the town that I live in. I know some guys that work down there, and they really love it. And it's not the money they love; it's the knowledge.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yes, and that's good. It's nice, but again, if you know people, do you know anybody who's like a professional student where that's like the only thing they have planned is just go to school and like study stuff? And I think that's fine, and that's definitely like something that we used to have as a culture. And I think there's value in employing people who study, and I think that's wonderful, and finding innovation. I'm just talking about the incentivizing people to create a finished statement is different than just employing people to study, because if we're committed to that, that's one thing. And I don't think we are as a society. I don't think we're committed to just paying people to study except for professors, maybe.
No,
We
Bell Labs
want
used to
results.
do
We want things to do
Yeah.
with the things.
I think by and large that's true, but there are notable exceptions. Google has a whole department, and they said we don't care what you do, just learn something new.
Mhm.
And Bell Labs used to do that, and Bell Labs had a couple of guys who won a Nobel Prize,
Hmm.
and they had no specific mission
Hmm.
to earn money for the company.
Hmm.
Now, what they did earned the company a lot of money,
Mhm.
but they were doing fundamental research.
So here's my sort of opinion on it.
But what you say is true by and large, but not in every case.
Mhm.
So historically, a lot of work that was just for curiosity or amusement is what had the biggest impact on science later on. Like the ancient Greeks, they were just playing around with geometry, and it was almost like a religion for them, these geometrical truths. And Euclid wrote his book, Euclid's Elements. It had maybe a teeny application for them, but very, very small. But you could argue that that was the foundation of all future science, was sort of their study of geometry. And sort of that's what developed the axiomatic system, which was then the scientific method, and then so on and so forth. The benefits were very, very long term and very hard to predict, but it did end up panning out. However, nowadays, I'm not sure. Nowadays, it's so much harder to make progress than it was back then, because back then the fields in science were more new. It was easier to get in a lab and discover new things. But nowadays, it takes years and a lot of risk to just discover the teeniest little thing. Like you might have to spend 20 years studying something for a 2% chance that you might come across something, and so that makes it much trickier. Because if
I understand what you're saying, and I don't disagree with you at all. But just for perspective, we are able to.
Bless you.
We understand now. Scientists understand now what the basic elements of matter are. They understand the distances to other planets. They send rockets and robots to other planets. And human progress has been extraordinary, I think, over the long haul. And everything that we have accomplished to date, we have been able to accomplish only understanding what 5% of the universe is made of. 95%, 90 to 95% is dark matter and dark energy. And they're called dark, not because they're dark, but because we can't see them. We don't know what they are. But mathematically, we know they have to exist. And so everything that we've accomplished only knowing what 5% of the universe is made of.
Well, and Becklin wasn't for a long time, being a scholar, a researcher was like a lifelong profession, wasn't it? You would decide if you want to do that, and I don't know where the funding came from, to be honest. Was it government funded? But I'm pretty sure they were lifelong professions, which is different than a lot of what, again, American culture is very much is a lot more short-term careers. And so, you say it takes longer to make discoveries, but we also are kind of put on this timeline where if we don't have something to show within certain periods of time, or if we have a indefinite amount of time to begin with. Like,
I agree, and I think what you're saying is true for most people, but fortunately, for at least some people, um, a formal education is what you need to make money. A self-education is what you need to make a fortune.
Mm.
And I would say that that's true regardless of the field you're in or the company that you work for. I
was talking about like actual institutions for learning.
Yeah, I understand.
And I don't know if they had extra jobs. As far as my awareness goes, that was the employment, is you could go and just be a scholar, and that was your profession, part of a guild or a college, but our colleges now are not what they used to, were not the same as the institutions of learning used to be. That's what I was saying, is that you would do it as a profession, and therefore you were learning for a lifetime. It's kind of like being, like being a rabbi, or being being spiritual leaders also did the same kind of thing. You would get immersed in a wealth of learning, and that was your profession. And I think it's very different from what we've created for ourselves now, where you are expected to pay for your learning now for a certain amount of time, and then you have to produce something by the end of it in order to either move on to a next segment of learning, or to a different profession entirely. I don't know. And I think that it kind of goes the same way for, like I said, for scientists, where they have to submit applications for grants, and they have time limits, and they have goals that they have to achieve in order to qualify for further, food for themselves. And I think it's a very different type of learning environment than used to be in place for a very long time. And I think that's really significant. And maybe it's the most efficient technically.
I think you're right. And while you were talking, I was reminded of Charles Darwin. He didn't need to do he didn't need to do work to make money. He was independently wealthy.
Mm.
He did it because he had a passion for understanding processes.
Was he an aristocrat?
Yeah, actually he was, yeah. Or he was from an aristocratic family,
Wait, wasn't Darwin he was in that voyage in the Galapagos, right? Wasn't he like some sort of sailor? He went on an expedition.
Yeah, he was a naturalist on the Beagle, which would a sailing ship at the time. Yeah.
And it went all over the world, right?
I think it circumnavigated, but I'm not positive.
I mean, maybe not in one trip, but I think he was in basically these very extended trips.
And a little side note, two little side notes. One of the tortoises or turtles that Darwin brought back from the Galapagos to England, and it was put in the zoo.
Like those mega ones, right? Really?
Yeah, it grew really huge. It just died about 10 years ago.
Really?
Yes. And
that's insane.
You've heard the story about...
That's true? That's a true story?
That's a true story. You've heard the story about Newton and the apple falling out of the tree. That's why I told you, because I was shocked too.
But that was like what, 200 years ago?
Well, he published in 1850.
So almost 200 years ago.
Well, it was more than 200 years ago. Yeah, because the Beagle was he he wrote for 20 years before he published.
So yeah, so about 200 years ago. That's
And
insane.
it was already large at that time, right?
And it was already
Oh,
large
yeah.
at that time.
I don't know, but
Oh, okay.
but it lived a long time. And the other thing that amazed me, we've all heard the story about the
Wait,
apple.
I'm
Apple,
shocked. Is this a real story or is this one of
Yes,
those?
it's real.
it's real.
It is real.
Really?
not-
This is a revelation for me.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do like
That's
Yeah,
why I told you it was a revelation for me too. But
I am shocked, man. This is
We-
like
we've
crazy.
all heard the story about the apple falling out of the tree and hitting Newton on the head, and that wasn't really true. Apple did fall out of a tree, but it landed beside him, and he thought about that. That tree is still alive.
Well,
Huh.
that's less surprising. I mean, it's still surprising, but yeah, trees can live for 1,000 years, I think.
Yeah, well, it depends on the species, but yeah.
Yeah, redwoods. I think there are some redwoods that have been there for over 1,000. I think. Is it?
Well, there are some redwoods that are 2,000 years old.
Wow. Can you imagine to live 2,000?
I don't know if
That's
they're
like-
redwoods. Sequoias, I don't know.
They're basically very uninteresting and very tall vampires.
Yes, exactly.
Well, since Michael's gone, I'm going to step away and refill my wine.
Yeah, we
I'm
can.
still here. I'm still listening to all you guys.
This is the preamble. It's the preamble. I got my peanut butter and jelly toast
Oh.
ready. I got
Great.
my coffee ready. That will not tilt because I will then destroy my second computer because this is Bat's computer. It's not mine. My computer doesn't. My computer, I can't use it for podcasts anymore. It's just not doable. Maybe you'll be able to restore it, Natasha. I don't know. But I'm
Maybe.
pretty sure I need a new one anyways. Because that one is super slow as well. At least it was working before. Now it's not. I can't even get it to turn on or stay on.
I'll take a look. I really think I would definitely start with the battery and then factory reset.
Well,
And like I said, it can just buy you time.
it's,
I mean,
it's a battery thing, but I don't know if it's the battery or if it's like the mechanical thing turning it on and off, which is
Mhm.
very possible because it's weird. I have to move the computer in order for it to turn off and on, It's weird.
oh,
Yeah.
that's very special.
That is very special. I have to move the computer in certain ways and it will turn off, it'll turn on.
Move the screen or move the
Both parts, but mostly the screen. Mostly, I need to find a way that it likes it that way.
Oh, I had that same issue with my Lenovo, and I actually replaced some parts that fixed it. There's it's like the wire that goes between the screen and the hard drive and the processor, all that.
I
the
think
whole
that
panel.
might be it. That's more likely than the battery, I think. Natasha is like a superior mechanic. Can I say mechanic for a
Oh.
computer or is it
No,
computer
no,
mechanic?
no. I fiddle with things that I'm not afraid of bricking. So,
How are you not afraid of breaking that?
So I have taken some very measured risks with my equipment and learned a few things, and that is it. And YouTube. So
The good thing about this computer is when I give it to you, you can break it if you want,
excellent.
because it's pretty much past the point of
3 years old we should be able to do something.
3 years old, but it doesn't work. I mean, it's not great.
Right. 3-year-old, you said HP, right?
Mm-hmm.
It should be able to work. We'll see.
Maybe.
I'll fiddle.
It doesn't look
So,
good.
Natasha, what do you do in your regular life?
I mostly do child caring things and home remodeling and sing for some masses, funerals and stuff. So
You sing?
yeah, that was going to be my initial. I initially got trained in opera for a couple years in German, and realized like the lifestyle, you either have to be a teacher
Not
or
much
be
call for German opera these days.
what?
Not much call for German opera these days.
Well, I mean, okay, I was thinking about moving to Germany to sing in operas because they actually have like they have a good resident artist program in Germany. But I didn't want to end up teaching it, and I get colds really easy. Get a lot of colds. That's not good for a singer. So I just do it. I mostly do it at church.
Speaking of colds, is it cold up there?
It is, but you know what? It's getting warmer every day. It's what was it today? It was like got up to 18 or something, maybe 20. But it's gonna be 40 on Monday. That's like Minnesotans will start walking around in shorts
Very
when
cold,
it hits
David.
40.
For anyone who didn't grow up in Minnesota, this is very, very cold. This is a cold place.
I grew up in Florida. I used to think 40 was like freezing and like 50 was pretty cold.
I came here from North Dakota, so
Yeah, North Dakota is even worse. That's why you're saying
this is an upgrade.
because they live in the midst of ice. But
Yeah.
for everybody else, this is pretty cold.
Plains where the wind just slices straight through everything.
Exactly. It's even. I mean, honestly, when I went to is Fargo in North Dakota, I think it is, right?
Mhm.
Technically, it's almost Minnesota, but yeah, it's northern Minnesota and actually North Dakota. And it's even colder than here. I didn't think it was possible, but you go up there and it's like, wow, this is even colder.
True.
I think partially it's the wind, because here we don't.
Oh, it's absolutely wind. Absolutely.
Yeah, we don't get much wind here, but there, whoo, you get
It's so
that wind,
flat.
you're gonna die.
Yeah, there's nothing to stop the wind. It just accumulates.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And Rupinder,'s in the house.
Hey guys,
So Rippinder, is that your bar behind you?
that's my mini bar behind me. Yeah,
How many bars do you have? I'm just teasing.
Rupinder loves
I
wine.
didn't get the
so
joke.
He has many. And he has a big house, so he can have many wine bars. Which is very, I'm happy for you, Rupinder. Yeah, that's very impressive that you have more than one wine bar.
And
That's
is that all quarter sawn oak around there?
No, it's just like this is just like a built-in thing. So just a couple of bottles scattered around. That's all.
Gorgeous wood.
All thanks to Bruno.
Well, I mean, not really, man. I just helped Rupinder with the buying of his house. I was the real estate agent, but it was mostly, he did most of the work. He researched the house and everything. So,
I heard a story about in the real estate fallout of 2008 and when I don't know, all that stuff that went on. There was this young couple that bought an older house, and they got upside down on their loan, and they couldn't make the payments. He lost his job, and so they were being evicted, and they were down in the basement cleaning out, and it was an older home, and they found some stuff that the original owner had left in there. And they looked in a box and they found
Nazi stuff.
issue number 1 of Action Comics.
Oh,
Superman with the green car.
Oh, so that's worth a lot of money, right?
Well, the bank said, take your time, sell it, do whatever you need to do. We're not going to evict you. He sold it for over $1 million.
Woo!
My.
How is that possible? $1 million for a comic?
For a comic?
Yeah,
No way.
not me.
It's a pretty famous comic.
Welcome,
Hey,
Frank.
Frank.
By the way, the gang is we're ready to go, man. 6 people.
Hey,
Hey. Wow, $1 million for a comic, man.
Yeah.
Is that what? And that those issues are like, you read it in 5 minutes, right?
It's not the length of time that it
No, I
takes.
know, obviously.
when you
It's-
have
I mean, it could
plenty
be
of
the
money,
words
you
of
have to-
Shakespeare.
the
You're
value
not
is
$1 million.
the value is solely in the mind of the collectors.
It's the same
Right.
thing. It's the same thing as the lawyer saying, "I'm not a cat." Trust me, I'm not a cat.
So good. Oh my God, I'm
In
not a cat.
2014,
I'm
a
live.
version of that comic sold for $3.2 million on eBay.
what did?
Wow.
Action Comics #1.
Hmm,
Why is it so expensive, Frank? Like,
Dude,
what's driving this frenzy?
It's
It doesn't have any
Having
value.
the money.
comic that
It-
sparked the
you
superhero.
have the money.
comic.
You just have to have the money in the first place and then have a hobby, and you just spend the money on the hobby because
You
Well,
have
you
to
need
have
to
more
spend it
money than
somehow.
brain.
You know,
It's
some
gonna be
people
crazy.
collect stamps, some people collect $3.2 million comic books, you know?
Ah,
oh my God. You got to be someone like Nicolas Cage. I think he's one of those guys, those nutty guys that pay $1 million for a comic.
You know what? That might actually be a good investment, though. Come to think about it.
I think Nicolas Cage collects those comics, so maybe he bought one of those. I don't know.
You can keep it in pristine condition and hold on to it, and it continues to accrue value.
not interested.
But you got to be very rich, man, because I mean that would make me nervous. So like this little.
Well, you don't have to
comic,
start with Action Comics.
$1 million,
Let's
I
find
mean-
you a cheaper one.
Action comic books, baseball cards.
Imagine
Yeah.
if someone like spills
Beanie
orange
Babies.
juice on it. Man, that would be a $1 million orange juice.
Hmm.
Because
I'll take a look at my basement tonight.
yeah, go have a look, Rupinder. Maybe you can pay off the rest of the loan with your comics.
Right.
is it? Okay, this is okay. So I'm gonna
Say
be
something
kind of
naughty or
extreme.
what?
Okay, be kind of extreme. Is it morally wrong to collect things?
What do you mean?
No.
You can't just say no. You have to say
Well, I believe I
Yes,
No.
we can.
Don't be ridiculous.
Well, why would it be?
okay. Well, what
It's
is
morally wrong to collect scalps?
collect things?
Oh, scalps.
To have
Scalps.
Oh, I didn't say scalps, no. No,
Yeah.
to collect in
Yeah.
general, to collect and store, without use, just to collect and store.
Nazi memorabilia, maybe.
I mean, it's one thing to have museums
My
where
dad
everybody
certainly
gets to
didn't think so.
partake and enjoy, but for one person to just
To hoard.
buy a bunch of things, have the money in the first place is a different issue. But to just buy a bunch of things,
Mm,
and just store them.
I think it really depends on what you're collecting, right? Because if you're collecting like video games, I mean, who gives a shit, right? I mean, like that's completely
I'm
transcendental.
not saying anybody should care about this. I'm just okay.
No, but look,
no,
there's
this
Do you
is
mean
actually
like-
good. Actually,
Like
Bruno,
Beanie Babies or
what if it's-
Pokemon cards? Or like I'm trying to get some context. You mean like Beanie Babies or Pokemon cards or something along those lines?
yeah.
Anything. It was just something that came to mind. I'm just curious because, okay, if you
Yeah.
think about the way that humans have had to live for a long time and even a lot of, with like poverty and all that kind of stuff, it's like there's one school where it's like, okay, having too much money, is a bad thing, right? So if you have so much money and it's not benefiting anyone and you're just hoarding the money, wouldn't that ergo mean that hoarding things you've bought with the money is also wrong?
Mm.
Well, I mean, like, I think you have to
You've
distinguish
added
between
a lot.
normal hoarders who are like just collecting trash versus maybe some pieces of art or value, you know, I don't know. Because there are a lot of people who hoard things and they are medically not fit, you know.
Okay.
Medically not fit.
I
Is
think
it-
I
That
think
might apply to some people I know.
less with the hoarding and avarice, and more so the gathering of things that other people could use that you yourself are not using. You're not making use of them.
Well, that's kind of my point.
Yeah.
Is it?
I don't think that's true of Pokemon cards or comic books or baseball cards.
I
or
really
Beanie
want
Babies.
first edition Charizard.
Yeah, if I think that's definitely an issue, Natasha. If we're talking about like something like food, for example, there's one yeah, actually something comes to mind that I've watched recently. I mean, not that recently, but like a month ago or 2 months ago. I watched the last season of Vikings, which, by the way, is probably my favorite show of all time. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it's a fantastic TV show. If you're gonna watch one TV show, watch Vikings. But one of the last episodes, there's this guy. So basically, that episode, they're in what's the place? I think it's Greenland. Oh yeah, they're all in Greenland. And this is kind of a spoiler, but not like a very mild spoiler. So because it's an unimportant plot point, but they're in Greenland, and basically, you have all these Vikings. There aren't that many of them, but you know, like 30 Vikings or something like that, 40 people, and they're basically starving, you know, because it's Greenland. It's not there. There isn't a whole lot in Greenland that you can do to grow food and all that. And they had just gotten there for the most part. And a whale comes to shore, and that's a lot of food, right? That's a lot of food. It's a whale. I mean, it's going to feed everybody. So everybody's like celebrating, you know, everybody is so happy, you know, and besides they believed in the gods. They thought it was the gods that had sent them the whale. It was like, oh yeah, they finally, you know, they're getting something from the gods. So they're in the good path because they're kind of like downtrodden. So it turns out that they had divided the land between them shortly before that. And the guy who had the patch of land where the whale landed on the shore said, oh no, sorry, but I'm just going to eat this myself and my close family here, you know, my wife and my, you know, I think he had a child. I don't know if we're going to get any more whales. So I better, you know, just save this food. Sorry, you can't have it. Right. And that's, you know, that eventually leads to a whole bunch of undesirable consequences. But that is like hoarding to the maximum degree, right? That is immoral. And that is kind of like, that is a small situation. That's a microcosmos that you could apply that to capitalism in general. Not that I'm saying that all capitalism is wrong, but we do have a system that where, you know, there's a big accumulation of resources in the hands of very few, and a lot of people in the world that are destitute. So that's kind of the application of the small principle to the whole world today. But yeah, I mean, in that case, I think it's immoral. Sorry I talked so long.
Well, to build on that though, that's like that definitely feeds into my question, is that there could be differences between the type of collecting. There's collecting things that are related to, say, experiences you've had and remind you, you know, of things you have done. They're sentimental. And there's collecting things because you think that they have value. It's basically having things in order to say that you have the things and nobody else has the things. And in order to have some kind of prestige. And I think that kind of collecting where you're just trying to have something valuable rather than something that represents something to you other than your wealth, might have some moral downsides.
Okay. I was gonna say, I think it can be, I mean, that could be on That could be one way of looking at it. I mean, I was gonna think just with the whale area and us talking about food and stuff like that. I think we can understand it.
Your sound is messed up, Frank. Something happened to your
Oh, it
sound.
is? Hold on. In a moment, Mal.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Ah, USBs. Anywho, I was gonna say a way we probably could understand it is just basic supply and demand. When person creates an artificial demand by hoarding supplies to themselves, you know, we see this all the time. Diamonds do this. We see PS5s. We see this done all the time, you know, with food and other areas like that, where someone is hoarding something beyond their own utilization in order to create a higher demand of people to the detriment of those people. And then, you know, uses it as, you know, they can use it, as you said, as kind of prestige or something over the person. I don't want to sound like Foucault and just be like, it's power, it's all power. But I mean, I feel the problem more so is coming down to with hoarders is just it's utilization. If the singular person can find utilization out of these things, if it's sentimental, if it's something that other people don't really have a demand for, and that person just really has it to themselves and it's not harming anyone else, in that case, I would say they let them hoard, have fun, go nuts with it. You know, the problem will come up when you know, another person comes up and go, well, gee, I would like to collect bat droppings too. You know, can you share those with me? And all of a sudden bat droppings start becoming valuable because he doesn't want to share his bat droppings.
And then you have something in the middle, which is like the toilet paper.
Guano,
right?
that's the word.
Toilet paper.
The toilet
Yes!
paper, I can't figure out like,
Yes!
which one does it go into? Which box? Does it go into the like the completely trash hoarder category or the resources that we actually need? I'm not really sure.
There's a lot of people around the world right now that have garages full of toilet paper that they can't
Exactly.
get rid of.
Will that create a social crisis in which basically people will figure out that they will never be able to use all that toilet paper and they'll just go around throwing it at their neighbors' houses?
You could figure out. I mean, you could do mummy parties where everyone dresses up like a mummy. You could, you know, do the houses. You could also use it for birthday streamers. You could really you could use it to take notes in class.
Maybe
The
that will
possibilities are endless.
Maybe that will create new forms of social interaction, new forms of culture, you know, all centered around excessive toilet paper.
Right.
That's nuts. I think that the hoarding of an artistic value, something which is like art, which can be appreciated by many, like somebody like grabbing a unique rendering of Rembrandt, for example,
Right.
and having them at their home. I think that's morally wrong.
Hmm.
I don't care about toilet paper, but I think if it's that should belong to something like a museum or something that everyone can appreciate it. Just, I mean, that to me sounds and feels like morally wrong, you know.
Yeah,
Well-
cultural hoarding.
I want to agree with you, but I also know if it was a piece of like a piece of modern art, I'd probably be like, oh, I don't give a shit about that. You can hang on to it.
Yeah, I see. All the modern art they can hoard away, but the other stuff, yeah.
Rembrandt, yes, you know, I mean,
Well, you can't eat Picasso.
What? Sorry, I didn't hear that, David.
Can't eat Picasso.
Oh, you can't eat Picasso. Yeah, but Picasso is very valuable, you know, for humanity. So I agree with Rupinder. Yeah, I mean, you can't really just keep Picasso for yourself. It's like keeping Shakespeare, you know. If one dude just had all the Shakespeare,
Okay.
I mean, that would be a problem.
With that in mind,
Yeah.
and I don't know if this relates, but you guys have to tell me if this connects. But the movie The Black Panther, which I really enjoyed,
oh, I see where you're going.
but isn't that in essence a country that decided to keep its technology and its wealth a secret from the rest of the world?
Yep. That's Wakanda.
Wakanda forever.
I mean, isn't that the very thing we're saying is immoral?
Well, the thing is, I wouldn't necessarily say, I would say it's not ethical and moral, morals are easy. I can justify.
Well, ethical, moral.
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
I'm just being, I'm being.
I appreciate that you went full nerd, David.
I
Not-
mean,
Not in a bad sense. I like that.
Do you think if we're going to, well, okay, so I think there's a little difference between that and what we're talking about, in that even if we say an individual can't have something, they need to have it accessible to the public, we're not saying that people from foreign nations can't visit it. They can't even find it. Which is what happened in Wakanda, which is they made themselves completely inaccessible and unnoticeable. And that would be an extra level that you would have to implement, that we aren't even at this point. We're talking about having the things available to the public, and the public includes
No.
immigrants,
No,
traveling. It includes anyone.
I fully realize that the Black Panther is a work of fiction.
What?
What?
Never-
Really? No, David, I'm not sure about that. Because I heard things on the internet.
Nevertheless,
if someone starts talking about lizard people
Our-
again, I'm gone.
society
I'll shut up for a second.
really enjoyed that story. And is that indicative of a problem? That we have a double standard about people who hoard toilet paper and people who hoard technology?
I think the double standard exists. I mean, I think it is supply and demand. I think it is like, I used a crude example of bad droppings, but I think toilet paper right now, right
That's
now,
a bunch of shit, by the way.
yeah. Well, it helps with it. Right now, we no longer have a huge demand for toilet paper. We've kind of gotten past that area in that arc. And a lot of people will look at someone hoarding toilet paper right now, and they would be like, whether it's moral or not, we really don't care because we don't, as a community, have a huge use for it. But a few months back, you look at that, and yeah, you would totally think it was immoral because no one could get their hands on the stuff. Wakanda is an instance of where they had the technology to help people that they know are suffering of these things full on, and they choose not to do anything about it because they're worried about what would happen. The people who are hoarding the toilet paper during, those first months know there were people that needed toilet paper, and they chose not, to hoard it, disregarding. So that's
Isn't
where
that
we would look and we'd say, you as an individual are immoral as you are relation to me unethical.
So now I'm
Didn't
not
the
sure
end
that
of the movie have them deciding to share? Wasn't right. So I'm not sure why we're saying that we as a society have a double standard when at the end of the movie they actually decided to.
The double standard.
I'm not talking
Share.
about the end of the movie. I'm talking about the beginning of it.
Okay, well, I don't think our society loves the movie just because the beginning Wakanda was not sharing. I'm just trying to figure out
To be fair, the plot
who
was
we're talking about.
All right. Let me make sure that I understand. Are you saying that it's okay for a nation to keep its wealth and its resources and its technology a secret from the rest of the world when the rest of the world could definitely benefit from it?
No, I was asking you because you were saying that the movie was a phenomenon and had a large following based on the fact that the nation kept these things from other nations. That particular premise is the one that I'm questioning, because I don't think it has a following because of that aspect. I don't
No,
think it was
I'm
a
not
popular
saying it
movie
has-
because of.
I'm not saying it has a following because of that aspect.
Oh, okay.
I'm
Okay, you're
saying
saying
that is without a doubt an aspect of that fictional nation.
Well,
except the
that-
fact that they
that-
changed their minds at the end is not.
That makes no difference.
It doesn't make a difference.
Does
Okay.
it make a difference to you?
So are you saying that we are celebrating Wakanda that in this movie or anything that's celebrated because they hoarded this stuff, but we are basically monster or defamatory slurs being thrown at people who are hoarding toilet paper, and that's the double standard. Is that what you're saying?
So are we talking about?
are we talking about?
No, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
I
Two nations.
Throttle back here for a minute.
yeah.
Does it? My question really is, does it damage us as a society for us to value literature where a nation keeps its technology and its wealth a secret from the rest of the world?
Okay.
That is my sole question.
I think you have to kind of like discriminate also the technology pieces to it.
So
if
like
the
stories about
technology piece is
Atlantis.
if the technology piece is going to impact human health, and you are restricting the technology and you're price gouging, as is being done with HIV medications, which have had tremendous technological advances, but still people in Africa can't, I guess, purchase them because it's too expensive. That I think is immoral.
Well, I think Africa is a little different, actually.
Why would Africa be a little different when it
What do
comes
you
to
mean by
like
that
something like
exactly?
AIDS?
Different from what?
Because the when in instances where where foreign nations try to send aid, some of the people in higher positions intervene, take the aid, and then try and sell it to the highest bidder.
You have global organizations like UNICEF. You could potentially like
Right.
give away.
I'm just saying it's difficult in Africa specifically.
Well, there are
That's
like-
all. That's all.
like
I
a
think-
whole-
I think it's a good
there was whole
question, though.
NPR study on this, you know.
But David, I would just say really quick, circling back to your valuing a story that about a nation that is hoarding its resources. I would just look at that and I would say, I would hope that people would be able to understand that the story is a fiction and abstract out that it doesn't necessarily pertain to this. They're not generalizing it up to a higher plane would be the technical term. But you know,
I think we should have greater expectations out of the general public than that.
And it should be said in the comics and everything like that. Yeah, Wakanda does open back up. So the story, I know you're using it just as a kind of leverage, almost like Plato saying we shouldn't watch the plays because it could give the wrong example of how to act in this situation.
Yeah.
But I would also look at it like people need to learn how to differentiate this shit from.
Now, having said that, I still have 24 rolls of toilet paper.
Mm.
I'm sorry, 16.
That's where this is from.
I don't get why people decided to hoard toilet paper out of all things. I really don't get it. I mean, I think that might be a symptom of something that is wrong with society.
You know,
maybe that's
you guys might want to look up.
Like, are people obsessed with their cleaning their butts?
Yeah.
You know, is that like when they were thinking, oh, we're gonna run out of things. We cannot go 2 weeks without cleaning our butts properly with this cloth material. You know, like what leads people to believe this?
You know, when I was up in the Arctic, we didn't use toilet paper. We actually used rocks and a stick.
That's disgusting.
Yeah, it
Rocks?
was.
Just like
Yeah.
using water.
You wanted to
I wanna
get a
say-
good
I wanna
rock.
say
You
about-
see, you wanted
Use
one that had a
water, Frank,
jagged
next time.
edge on one side and then a smooth edge on the other side. And you see, you use the jagged edge to do the initial tearing, and then you use the smooth edge to finish it
So,
up.
so if I'm out for a walk
you-
and I see a pile of rocks, I should say, "Oh, Frank's been here."
Yes, you
Yes.
should.
Yes.
Well, Frank, if you did YouTube videos during the pandemic, early pandemic days, you know, explaining how the rock system works, man, you would have had so many viewers.
I was in the middle of tundra. It should be
For all
said.
those
We
people
were
obsessing
in the
with
middle of
getting
the
the toilet
tundra
paper.
where there is about 20 other people that venture there per year. So we could get away with shit like that. I would never do that to any of you while in this.
Literally get away with shit
Would
like
do
that,
it
you know?
to
Yes.
anyone else?
What?
Oh my God. Okay.
I was completely oblivious of this rock system. I thought it was
If you're
leaves,
in the
man. I thought
tundra
people
for
didn't
for
leave.
60 days, you can't.
Yeah.
I mean, you could pack enough toilet paper, but that's a lot of weight taking up space in your
Why would
pants
you
if you
just
have to
use
move.
water, man?
We did. It doesn't work. The water's really fucking cold up there,
Are you
and
freaking not kidding me?
Imagine that.
I can't. I
ice
cannot
water.
explain how cold it is up there. Okay, middle of the summer, the ice packs haven't
Where
even
wa-
thawed.
Where was this? Where was this exactly?
This was the Arctic, up in Nunavut. So
None of it. How did you end up there?
I did these trips when I
That
was
sounds like
younger.
a fake place. That's a fake
No,
place.
that's
isn't
a
it?
real-
No, it's a
that's
province in
Like Donda
Canada.
talking, you know.
None of it. I will have none of it.
Maps. I
want none of it.
I never thought like people actually go there. That's very
Oh,
fast.
it's beautiful, breathtaking. But yeah, we wiped our ass with rocks.
Can you drive there?
Mm-mm. Well, you can, but no, you can't. The roads end in Yellowknife. You have to be flown out there. So, and then they drop you. We got dropped in the middle of a river and traveled about 800 miles.
Drop. How do they drop you?
Float planes land in the middle of the water, and then you unload all your stuff.
Wow.
Can I bring up a? Can I go back to the nation sharing thing?
Rocks.
It's better than the toilet paper that I keep bringing up.
Okay.
I think we need to deviate
I don't
from-
One thing that you have to decide is if nations are required to share valuable technology, then you're also saying they are required to have other people know how they defend themselves, right?
Not necessarily, no.
You're saying nations should be required to share everything up until anything that could cause disadvantage.
No, I'm just
To the
saying it
country?
doesn't necessarily follow from sharing technology that they're sharing defending themselves.
But again, where is the line? To what extent is the country
That brings us
required to disadvantage itself?
yeah, that brings us back to the moral question, which would be I'd look at you like, I don't know, where's the line? What's
Well,
sufficient to?
I think
At what point do you think is enough?
I think it's what Rupinder said. You know, it depends. That's why you have to differentiate, right? Because it's totally true that by sharing technology, you're exposing yourself, you know, in the real world. I mean, if you're sharing, say, nanotechnology with other countries, you know, assuming that one country has it, the other ones don't. I mean, that has clear military applications. It has a bunch of other applications. And I'm not an expert in nanotechnology, but I've played enough video games to think that that might be applied to military
mean,
uses.
Even if
But-
you share health information, if you share
Well,
if you share
say
a cure,
atomic
you could
atomic
also,
stuff, right? Atomic stuff is a clear cut. You know, atomic is, you know, can be very effectively used for peaceful purposes, but obviously has very powerful military applications, right? So Yeah, I
Well-
mean, there's a definite, you can't just share technology and not expect to be exposed. I
What
mean,
about
but like
sharing
Rupinder said,
biological?
if it's
information?
medicine,
But what allows other countries to advance on biological warfare, for example?
Probably biological warfare things.
But how much information sharing gets you to that point within
know.
the
Like if
field of
it's-
biology?
Maybe something like a vaccine or like a
Yeah,
medicine. I mean, like that's like, maybe there may be a need to create like a global bullet point agenda about, like what technologies can benefit mankind, Earth, climate, and maybe should be shared. Like,
Mhm.
if carbon emission is a problem, and a lot of people like in the developing countries or underdeveloped countries are like, piling on automobiles and gas emissions and this and that, should we share electric technology, electric battery technology, like Tesla is doing? It's made it clear, like it's an open thing. It's an open share thing. Anybody can come and utilize that technology. So I think like those things make sense. But there may be some technologies which won't make sense, especially like if it's leading to warfare, atomicity, or biological weapons or something like that.
Or it's not quite technology, but we did touch on this. The idea that you have to share maybe your culture or your art or something like that with people that you may kind of see as your heritage, and you might want to hold on to that identity for your people, not necessarily share that.
Well, I wonder if the dividing line that we're looking for here
Mhm.
is something that would propose an existential threat if used inappropriately, and something that would save lives. Vaccines would save lives. Nuclear weapons would pose an existential threat. Is that the dividing line?
I think that,
What about nuclear? What about power?
yeah, that could help.
It would help, sure. I would share it.
And it can also hurt people. Both historical
Right.
instances have happened.
I read somewhere that electricity increases the odds of surviving past 5 years of age by 75%. That's huge.
It's a lot.
I don't know how valid that is, but
Like because electricity supports.
not valid, factual.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of why that would be. Like because of more advanced medicine.
Well, in some countries that don't have electricity, or areas that don't have electricity, sometimes for heat in the winter, they will
Oh.
burn fires in the house and
Wood stoves.
smoke. No, they don't even have wood stoves.
Oh, well, that's bad.
That is bad.
So because of inhalation.
Yeah.
Would that be because of lack of electricity or because of inhalation?
Or electricity prevents you from suffering from the inhalation.
Possibly.
I had to put kids to bed.
Okay, have fun.
All right. Oh, I will have so much fun.
Mhm.
I know that's a tough one.
They're not that bad. They're not that bad. They're pretty good.
It's all worth it.
All right. Good seeing y'all.
Does it get
Yeah.
easier with time, Natasha?
What?
That part. I'm assuming it does, right?
The consensus is not the same across parenthood. So it's really so for us it goes pretty well. We have an established routine that we stick to and we have for years, and that's probably why it works. Is we're clear and we stick to our guns no matter how much they whine, and eventually the whining goes away. Eventually, and that's kind of what parenthood is about, is just sticking to your guns until the whining goes away.
That's the core principle.
Yeah. Yep. So I mean, like I said, it works. Our kids are pretty good at bedtime, but there are definitely some parents who will not say that it gets easier. So.
Okay. No. So
not to scare you or anything. I'm sure it'll be fine. Sure.
No, I mean, I think those are good. That's good advice.
All right. See y'all later.
Wisdom. Good luck, Natasha. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, now we're all orphans of ideas now that Natasha left, it seems.
Did you guys ever talk about science and philosophy?
Philosophy or philosophy of science?
Philosophy of science. I've had a few. Get off my back, Michael.
Science of philosophy. I was
I've
confused.
thought about that. Like, there's a lot of good questions in the philosophy of science. Like, first of all, what is science? And how do you differentiate it from non-science?
Pseudoscience.
Yeah.
That's
So
awesome.
the problem is, like, I feel like I read a little bit about that already. So I feel like a lot of it would be like me regurgitating sort of what I know on it. But
let it go.
I'm just gonna throw it open to like what you guys think.
I think the philosophy of science has led to the advances in science.
Okay. So you mean like the scientific method, and
No, I'm talking about imagination.
Imagination. I want to give that to mathematicians.
Well, whenever we talk about technologies, I mean, it's philosophy of science in a way, but I don't know if it's like the most traditional, like philosophical debates on it. I mean, the philosophy of science tends to be like fairly dense, right? So
yeah,
like the traditional philosophers in philosophy of science. Like, what's one topic in particular that you're thinking about, Frank? That something that you're thinking about?
Yeah, Frank, entice us into this subject.
Okay.
With
All right. Well, Mike kind of brought it up, and it's a simple one, but it's pretty damn good. How do we categorize what is scientific and what isn't scientific? How do we differentiate between the two? This is significant in today's society and has been for quite a while, hundreds of years, ever since the scientific method has been recognized as, so effective and such an authority. People often say that something's scientific when it's not, to get people to forgo looking further into it, either rigorously or through evidence. And oftentimes it comes down to how can we as individuals who read studies or anything differentiate clearly and effectively between what is and what isn't scientific, what should be taken on the basis of that they are an authority in that subject, and what shouldn't be.
If I keep repeating the same thing again and again and get the same outcome,
I mean,
definition,
that wouldn't. That's a very layman's layperson's area of what is scientific. I mean, I would say you're out.
I think you've just been insulted, Rupinder.
No. It's not. I'm sorry. I've had a few. I'm drunk. Anywho,
he called it science of philosophy before, so I wouldn't.
So there's a couple problems. So a lot of science isn't necessarily in a lab. A lot of it is kind of putting the pieces of a puzzle together. Like for example, like if we're talking about like evolution, you can't really prove evolution in a lab, but you can we put the pieces of the puzzle together. We take what we know and we try to reverse it back in time to try to get a sense of whether it's true or not. But then even with experimentation, there's also problems that arise. Like you can only do an experiment, or usually we only do experiments on Earth, but a lot of things that are true on Earth might not be true in other places. You can't do your experiment in every setting possible, so you'll never know whether that thing that you're trying to prove is true in every circumstance. It's kind of like
I'm trying to.
Maybe it's the quest of expanding your knowledge base. Maybe it's as simple as that, because there are a lot of experiments which fail, but we learn a lot from it.
See, I would say that's insufficient, because I would say knowledge is ambiguous, and someone can claim that something is knowledge, justified true belief, on the basis that they believe that it has a factual reference, and by some means it be evidence, they can justify it. That can pertain to a lot of things that wouldn't be seen necessarily by definition as scientific. There's a lot of fields that we have knowledge of, for example, that are not science. We would not say are scientific fields.
Give me an example.
History. Let's say, there you go.
I mean, when we talk about,
how would you correlate history with science, Frank?
I would say I do not see the study of history as a scientific class. It is a class. We have knowledge on it.
I would have never thought history to be science, but history can be science when it comes to evolution. Like
it can be, but it's under, Michael kind of got at it. It's under certain circumstances where not what we just basically see from studying history, something else gets added to it to make it
before we go too far down that path.
Okay.
Michael said that evolution has not been proven in the lab.
Or kind of, that's not how you prove. That's not how you prove it. You might be
prove
able to prove
things
it for
in science.
specific species, but like in general, it's more kind of putting the pieces of the puzzle together logically, rather than test tubes and stuff, I guess.
But I think it was a live experiment done through ages. So it was kind of an experiment, but we had to kind of like look at hindsight to establish the causation,
Yeah, but it wasn't us conducting it, and we didn't observe it at the time it happened, right?
No.
We're kind of putting the pieces of the puzzle together.
That's what I'm saying. Like historically, also, there can be some examples of science,
If what you say is true, help me understand how a biologist should interpret changes in bacteria that are observed in the lab as a result of environmental stresses.
So yeah, for bacteria, he or she might be able to prove evolution happens in bacteria in the lab. But then you'd have to generalize it to all species, and that that isn't strictly in the lab. That's using our own logic and common sense, I guess.
Isn't the oldest bacteria found in Siberia? There was an NPR talk about it. They found like a billion-year-old bacteria, which has not been exposed, and I wish I could like share that with you. I'll try to find it. It was pretty fascinating.
Well, let's say we have two scientists, okay, and both of them are, let's say their conclusions are the same. All right, let's say they're both arguing for evolution, and I happen to be a well-endowed, smart individual who's not as drunk as he is now, and
now, Frank, what is it about talking with us that causes you to drink beforehand?
It's not talking to you guys. It's that I'm off.
I only drink when I'm with you guys. I don't drink beforehand.
I don't drink any other time. Yeah.
And David, I just have one bar, man. I don't know like why you keep on talking about multiple bars. Like, there's only this one bloody thing behind me.
Maybe it's David, and he had a few, so he looks at you and he thinks, well,
Well, Rupinder's face looks like he has multiple bars.
I
mean,
think the bar is
That's just
fault.
my face, man.
All right, so I got two guys who both claim to be scientific, who come to the same conclusions, and I wander up to them and I say, say, okay, how did you come to these two conclusions? And this is where, the nitty gritty starts getting in. And both of them are arguing for evolution. And one of the people makes the claim, okay, I've made a set of observations. Okay. From that, I formed a set of, assumptions from those observations. And then I tried to test it, got evidence, and then I analyzed those evidence as they, corresponded to my hypothesis, and then sought out to, I used hypothesis, so I gave it away. And then I set out to reproduce or try to new results, and the other person said, I made a set of observations and I came to the most likely conclusion in my mind. This makes it too obvious. This is the big difference between these two is one's using a form of reasoning where they're coming to the most likely scenario in their mind and saying that is what it is. The other one's they're making that same assumption with a hypothesis, but then they're moving on to say, how do I test this to a way that I can get correlative evidence? And then how do I analyze to see if I can reproduce what Rupinder was getting at, the result, or reconstruct my hypothesis to build theory? I don't know. That's the whole thing. I just did it.
Well, one, you're kind of using logic to piece the puzzle together. The other, you're doing a definite experiment where you're testing something.
Yeah. Now understand the second one that I said was just, probable. That'd be more like a mathematician or a logician. Then it would be a scientist. That's where you're just you're not trying to find out the truths of the factual world. You're going to the most probable. You're going to what is possible. That's the giveaway. And you're kind of constructing from that, an abstraction.
Now, I guess what confuses me is, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that, for example, a theory is a collection of observations that match the facts that are available.
A theory.
It doesn't have to be a true theory. It could be a wrong theory, but
it could be.
I wanted to find this right. Please forgive me. I have to look at Wikipedia.
In other words, we all know that gravity exists because we can take something and we can drop it. So gravity exists.
Maybe on Earth, but maybe in dark matter, maybe it just does something different.
Could be, but it definitely exists here.
Yeah.
and having a theory of gravity is trying to understand what causes that.
So a scientific theory is an explanation of an aspect of the natural world that can be repeatedly tested and verified in accordance with the scientific method using accepted protocols and observations, measurements, and evaluation of results.
Which is totally different from a hypothesis.
Yes.
Correct.
It is completely different from a hypothesis. A hypothesis is straight up what's known in, I've said it before, what's known in logical circles don't say educated guess. It's abductive.
Sometimes it's not even educated.
It's what's known as abductive reasoning, which is you make a probable conclusion from an incomplete set of data.
Is anybody here familiar with Sean Carroll?
Yes.
Yeah, physicist. He says, when we study physics, if we want to come up with something new, the first thing we do is guess. Yeah, and that's true.
Yeah.
Sometimes
true.
it's an
That's true.
educated guess, but it's a guess.
Keep
Agreed.
saying the guess just
So what defines the science that you're talking about? It seems it's Frank, the way you're putting things is so science is defined by the methodology. Is that
Yes.
what you're proposing?
adherence to a methodology that the big deal, one of the biggest deals, the one that Popper brought up and the logical positivist brought up, was that the idea that it progresses from that abductive, that hypothesis reasoning to one, it can be tested. The hypothesis can be tested. It's made in a way that it can be tested in the real world. That's kind of what Michael got at in the factual area. And two, that once it's tested, we can progress from that abductive reasoning to inductive reasoning, classical induction, which is to say, I'm going from abductive, which is an incomplete set of observations to a probable conclusion, to inductive, which is a complete set of observations to a general conclusion, which basically that's what happens if you test. You now have a complete set of observations. That's the difference of it. And your conclusion is now general. It's not probable, because you're just documenting what happened after the test. You're not coming up with the possibility in your mind anymore.
Now, here's one big question in science. Let's say you have a certain theory that's a lot of people accept it, or it's fairly widely accepted, and then you have an experiment and it doesn't align with the theory, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that means we have to change the theory, but sometimes we think we made a mistake somewhere in our experiment.
Yep.
How much energy should we put towards each one? When do we go after the experiment and say, oh, we must have made a mistake somewhere? And when do we go after the theory and say, our theory must have been wrong?
That's definitely a case-by-case basis.
Yes.
I feel like a
If
lot
you
of
try
time.
to come up with some general axiom that you can apply to all situations, you're destined for failure.
Definitely. Yeah. Now,
I
the thing
feel-
is, if you take global warming, like sometimes, I'm sorry, I'm gonna let Frank go ahead just because I haven't thought through this totally.
No, go ahead. Oh wait,
Oh.
no, you haven't thought through for it. Okay.
But-
I was gonna say on the case-to-case basis and everything, I would say it's mostly just about. It's kind of hilarious because it goes back to that abductive reasoning again. It's a balance of probabilities. We're going like, okay, what's more likely? Did we do the test wrong, or is our theory just complete fakakta? Go ahead, Mike.
I think there's going to be like mathematics which can explain quite a bit of it, because when you construct math around it, right? Looking at probability stochastics, then there was always going to be like some variables which are unexplainable, and that's what you need to focus on. And so you know, like, okay, there's this one variable which I can't explain, and that's where maybe more experimentation needs to happen to understand it, like we did with the Colbert experiment, trying to break.
I understand what you're saying, but I think I don't know. But I have a friend
Ooh.
that if I heard the click, click, clack of hoof prints coming down my street, I have a friend whose first idea would be, oh, that's a unicorn.
Yeah.
And my first idea is, no, that's a horse or a cow. It's not, why jump to something that heretofore we have never seen any evidence of as your first inkling of what's going on? So I understand what you're saying, but I think in addressing what Frank is saying, I'm trying to just raise that point.
Yeah, that's kind of where you go. It could be a unicorn, but why would you think that?
But here's the thing: there's many situations in which you could make a good faith salvage. Like let's say gravity pulls things down to the earth, right?
Yep.
And then you see a bird flying up in the air, so you're like, oh, disproved. That like that absolutely disproves gravity. A bird is going up, not down. Yeah,
Yep.
but you have to salvage it. Gravity in many cases pulls it down, but there could be things that don't. And you could say, oh, you're caveating, you're trying to skirt around the issue.
Well, that's where you run up, grab the bird, and tie its wing ups, and just drop the fucker.
So there's always
Gravity.
situations where you're making a good faith caveat. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
One thing about gravity that is dying a very, very excruciatingly slow death is the concept that gravity is a force. It is not.
It is a force. Wait,
It's not a force.
maybe I should go get another drink.
It's the curvature of space-time, basically.
Yes.
That's what they say, right?
It is.
Yeah. But the thing is like, so like my example with the bird, where you see a bird going upwards and you say that disproves gravity, right? Well, so, and you would say, no, that's actually a good faith. That's actually a good,
Strong. Yeah, gravity.
If it disproves gravity, why don't you fly up there and get that bird?
yeah. But with often like with what religion, they try to do a similar thing where you might say, hey, this disproves it. And then they'll say, but hey, we have a caveat, and this is a reasonable caveat, right? So this is kind of where it gets tricky. What's the difference between science and pseudoscience or religion?
And reasonable to whom?
Yeah. But like,
Well,
what's the bird thing reasonable, but something that a religious, like
This
kind of religious pull wouldn't be reasonable? Yeah.
Yep, this goes back to that testable hypothesis that we were talking about before, where
Testing?
testable hypothesis.
Okay.
Yeah, and how it deals with bad faith, or the idea that someone looks at something and goes, oh well, that's not the case then, or anything, and the testable hypothesis is like, no. You need to give sufficient conditions that we as a group can test this in our world where you can be potentially falsified or wrong. And someone could indeed say, the bird is flying, therefore not gravity. And then I look at it and be like, but that bird is sitting on that branch. That's what birds sit on there. And if he didn't have to worry about gravity, why is it that when it's not sitting on the branch, it has to flap these wings? Where are all these other motions? Where are all these other things here? Is there a testable circumstance that you can show me that the bird could, it wouldn't be for all instances, it's not mathematic, with a high degree of certainty or likeliness does defy gravity, that it doesn't prove, God damn it, this isn't mathematics, that it can make us somewhat certain of not gravity. I don't know how scientists talk.
Well, I guess what you're saying is the question is, how does a bird flying negate all that we know about objects that fall?
Yes. That's
but you could say the same thing. Let's say for millennia, people believed in a certain religion, and then you see something that contradicts the religion.
Oh, that'll never happen.
Yeah, yeah. So then you say, how does that one observation contradict everything we've ever known about this religion for millennia? So that's how, people try to.
Well, the religion has a lot of religions, and this is kind of the nice thing about a religion, is because it's usually about text. It has some familiar, and please don't hit me for saying this. It has some similarities to mathematics and logic in that it's not being a model or trying to approximate something that's in our world. It's oftentimes just a system of belief that's looking to, reform itself and refind a way to make itself work. When we find contradictions with it, just like laws, I called these, don't hit me again, like logic and other ways, it doesn't have to approximate something. It just has to keep itself going in a way that it doesn't contradict itself. That's all it has to do. That's the only caveat it has to do.
And how does it do that, Frank?
It does it by, people who work in those things go in there and take a little pencil and be like, oh, well, this isn't working out for us. So maybe we just pencil that part out and write that part new in.
And in my view, well,
a lot of religions, I should say, though, and laws try to also be a model of, how people interact or something at the exact same time. Although, unlike science, which has a method that says you have to be doing this shit, I don't see one in these ones, so I'm not assuming it.
Well, from my view, and I could be wrong, but I don't think so. Otherwise, I wouldn't think this way. But from my view, when I look at history and the progress of humanity, if I try to imagine something that religion, something about science that religion has proved wrong, I can't come up with anything. But if I try to imagine something about religious views that science has proved wrong, I come up with lots of things.
The thing is, I could potentially give credit to religion on things that it has proved wrong in science. Well, it hasn't really proved wrong or anything like that. But the thing is, I'd rather give it to mathematicians. And it's not that they prove something wrong. Mathematicians and philosophers, it's usually what they did. They didn't really prove anything wrong with science so much as they came in, and mathematicians, with biology, basically gave them the roadmap to DNA and biological mathematics. And,
this is not religion, but take, for example, astrology. Astrology makes millions of predictions.
Mm-hmm.
Over half of those predictions are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And science makes predictions about when will eclipses occur.
Mm-hmm.
And it is right 100% of the time.
So yeah, it's really a matter of degree. So, I mean, in science, sometimes you have to caveat your findings because, like with the bird example, you have to caveat, well, I meant things that aren't flapping. If it's not flapping, it'll fall.
Well, that's remaking your hypothesis. That's going back and saying, hey, it didn't align with my initial theory, so I'm going to remake it, retest it, see if it works in this new circumstances. So you are doing the method.
Isn't it a denial of lift?
I mean,
well, now that we know about lift, but like even in science, like a lot of times we question the experiment, right? Like we'll say, if it doesn't align with the theory, we'll be like, we really believe that theory. Maybe the experiment is really wrong, So I think it's a matter of degree, whereas in science, we're just doing it less than religion. Like in science, we're still going back on our theory, revising it, but we're still caveating things. But I think in religion, we're just doing it a lot more. Like whenever something doesn't agree, we caveat it again, doesn't agree, we caveat it again. So I think it's the amount of effort that you need to do the caveating.
And that kind of gets at the other thing, because science doesn't, because science, we have to, how do I want to put this? we have those experiments that sometimes go against recognized theories that, or laws even, that we hold in such high regard, but this person is showing evidence and experimentation that oftentimes we're not willing to believe what they put up right away, and it has to gain that kind of momentum before it can convince the scientific community that no, what we were doing is not the case. This actually has more than enough to usurp it or come in and knock it off its throne.
And now here's the other interesting thing about science is that
Or
you never know when your theory works in every circumstance. So like gravity, we might think that it behaves a certain way all the time, right? But when you get closer to the speed of light, it doesn't really behave that way at all. Or maybe dark matter doesn't behave that way at all. So all the experiments we do, they're usually on Earth. They're often in a lab setting. And so we can have more confidence that our theory is true in situations that are closer to everyday life. But we don't know that that theory is true in crazy out there situations. So yeah.
Isn't this like mostly
Let me give a contrary example.
Yeah.
Just for grins and giggles, you know, doesn't cover every situation, but in 1919, there was going to be an eclipse of the sun, and the theory of general relativity had predicted that gravity could be strong enough to bend light. But when we looked at the sun, it was so bright we couldn't tell, you know, if it bent light. But during an eclipse, we could. And
It's awesome when the theory matches perfectly. It's amazing.
And
Yeah.
it totally added up. Totally.
Now, this is one I think is really cool. So like Einstein's theory of relativity, it predicted that there would be these things called gravitational waves. I don't know exactly what they are, but basically his theory made a bunch of predictions and it was able to test a bunch of them. But this thing, gravitational waves, he thought it would be so hard to test it in a lab that he thought we might never be able to test it. So he'd never really be able to know whether he was right. And I think it was just a couple of years ago, maybe like 5 years ago, they finally came up with this super expensive machine that was able to detect it. And it found these gravitational waves exactly as Einstein said 50 years ago or whatever.
It was just a couple of years. Not even 5, it was just a couple of years.
Just a couple of years, yeah. So yeah, those things, whenever I see things like that, you know, it gives you a burst of confidence in science and all that. However, you still have to remember, you know, maybe gravitational waves, maybe in some way out there circumstance that really doesn't work that way. So you can never know that it works in every circumstance, but it gives you more confidence as you see it work in more cases.
I don't know. I have confidence in theoretical physicists. They can get pretty weird. I mean, I know it can't work in all situations. They can't do all possible worlds, but just based on their area of study, but they can do some pretty weird stuff.
Going a little bit back to your question, Michael, about, I mean, not your question, but your general topic of science and religion. So you asked why we're able to kind of like why religion can accommodate science continuously. I don't know if you guys want to go back to that, but like one thing that I think you guys didn't say that I think is very relevant is that a big part, I think the main reason why we are able to always reconcile what science is telling us and what religion is telling us is that if we're so inclined, and a lot of people are so inclined, we'll just decide to believe something because we really want to, you know? We don't just listen to logic. I mean, that's just really not how humans work. I mean, I try to listen to logic, but I also try to be a philosopher. mostly a pretty, you know, rudimentary one compared to
I'm an apple and I'm
truly
not an
intelligent
apple.
people.
Look, if then not necessary. TV on head. What? No, not yes. Yes, no. You
But
said we weren't being
Take another sip, Frank.
Everything happens.
but people, they will believe in what they want to believe in. You can believe that Adam and Eve is real, even though you have evolution. Of course, you can't believe it.
Is Adam and Eve not real?
Yeah, well, it depends. It depends on what you want to believe in, right? I mean, and I know
Or
you're
make it
joking.
more
but-
metaphorical. Yeah.
Yeah, you can say it's a metaphor. You can say a lot of things. You can it doesn't really matter what science throws at you. I mean, it is completely irrelevant. Of course, science has disproven religion a number of times. I mean, that is like, if we look at it from a logical perspective, I mean, there's no way that you can make the another, that you can reach a different conclusion. There's just no way. What we do is, not me, because I'm a Catholic, but I'm not, a hardcore Catholic. I'm more a Catholic in terms of tradition, right? Um, but someone that really wants to believe that, yeah, the Pope is, the representative of God on earth, and that, Jesus is that, and the Holy Ghost is the, I don't know, really believe in those things, like Adam and Eve. Moses got the word of God, and he put it down on little tablets. Like, you have all these things that you can choose to believe in, and a real Catholic, a real Christian will probably believe in those things. But I mean, there's no way you can say that science hasn't disproven a whole bunch of that stuff, and the same goes for any religion, not just Christianity. I mean, we can explain today, what produces a thunder. The Vikings could not, right? So they came up with Thor, or Odin. So, but
I'm an atheist.
yeah. So look, they're not compatible really, but we can make them compatible if we want to, because that's how we do it. That's how humans do these things. Just like, other notions, we do that to a whole lot of stuff. Nationalism. What's nationalism? And to a great degree, nationalist politics is making make believe. You invent something, like a lot of the stuff that we talk about, that people believe in is made up. And it's like really harsh to say that religion is made up, but if you study things, yeah, that religion is made up. But we
Yeah.
can see other things.
I'm not in the same camp of like Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens, where I'm like really combative against it, and I'm like, this is something that, like, I don't think too much about it, but I don't fight like believers that hard. Some people think you should. I haven't really thought too much about it. I think there's a lot we can learn from religion. So I'm kind of hesitant to just like, we gotta get rid of it.
I'm not trying to be combative.
No,
I'm just trying to look at it like from a logical perspective, right? Which
Yeah.
I think is what we're.
I
trying
mean,
to attempt.
I can say flat out right now, scientism, the idea that science can solve all its problems, that's complete bunkum. I mean, the scientific, we just discussed a hypothesis, and we just talked about it going to the area of probability, that it relies on your ability to, manifest these manifestations of what could most be likely the observer doing this. If we were just to say, oh, all things need to be based on fact, you literally couldn't move forward with the scientific method. You would be stuck right there, making an observation. You couldn't make an inference from your observation. You make an observation, you would note the observation. That would be it. That's all you'd be doing.
So what would you do instead?
What I would do instead is I'd make an inference. I'd have logic in mathematics. I'd have, with religion, I would have the ability for people to have beliefs. We can get into the areas of logic with models or approximations of the areas around them that they can make probabilistically in their mind. When we talk about fictions or some science fiction, this is a great thing. you have people all the time who write about time travel or these crazy ideas in their time that they think might be able to happen or something like that because they're just so imaginative. But then, later on, Einstein with was it Rosenfeld? Yeah, finds out, hey, there is something like a wormhole in space that would allow someone to travel back in time, potentially before they got on that rocket and left the Earth faster than the speed of light. Or, you have those instances. I'm using science fiction right now, but, we could also use religion in some instances. I'm not as well versed on using the religious part.
Well, I think
And you shouldn't equate science fiction with science.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I think it's not about being pro religion and anti religion. I think that's not how that debate should go. I think the debate is what is
I was
what is
debating
true,
scientism.
what is true, and you figure out, like, looking at the facts, and using logic. I mean,
I was reading something a bit ago about
come up with what you
how
think is right.
religion isn't really meant to be epistemological. I hope I'm saying that right. It's more,
Knowledge-based.
yeah, it's more a way of approaching life.
Okay. It could be that.
Well,
Like, I can
religion definitely that's I would say that's not true. I mean, for to a large extent. I mean, there are many different ways you can interpret religion, right? But it's not. I mean, it's obvious that religion has tried to tell us truths about the universe. Adam and Eve is the history of evolution, but told, basically it's a different tale of how we got here. Adam and Eve is, hey, this is Christianity's and Judaism, if I'm not mistaken, way of
No.
saying, we got here because of that, right? And just like evolution does that for science, or the Norse had their own myths, and the Greeks and the Romans had their own religion as well. I mean, those are different stories to explain some physical phenomena and some history, so there is definitely an element of that, but partially why people are so adamant in defending religion is because they see value in it in other forms. For example, the morality that comes with religion. People think that, or at least many people think that you can't have morality if you don't have religion. So we might as well believe a little bit in those things.
I don't think that
Well,
works.
I think that's yeah, I certainly don't think that way. But
I think
some people do, and
religion is a possible or sufficient condition for morality, though it is not a necessary condition.
yeah, I mean,
And have morality without religion, though I have observed, people who have their morality as a consequence of their religion.
I'm going to post.
Feel like are all religions like created equal in today's time?
Huh?
Would you consider all religions to be? Would you consider like all religions to have like an equal platform in today's time?
I don't.
Like when you look at Islam, when you look at Judaism, when you look at Christianity, when you look at Sikhism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, Jainism.
I think if I call them equivalent or even similar, I'd be simplifying quite a few of them. A good example of this would be Buddhism. If I try to put Buddhism with specifically, what is it? How do you pronounce it? Mayan Buddhism or whatever, the Eightfold Path shit.
Mahayana.
I can't. I'm sorry. I feel like if I compared that to, Judeo-Christian values and those, you would see some overlap. Yes, there are some overlapping areas, but you would also see, I'd really have to cherry pick those overlapping areas and disregard all the differences that I see in these different types of religions. So the only way I could look at them and say that these are analogous is I'd have to be really picky about the context I place them under, or I'd have to oversimplify them to a point that I could say that via cherry picking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would just like look into a broader context of like, okay, which one of them like has a higher fanatical population content, which one is secular, and then within those, who controls the broader narrative?
Mm.
Is it the secular or is it the fanatical? You know,
That's another thing. I don't know. By controls the narrative, you just mean like someone has a direct control over.
like say for example, like I'm not a Christian.
Mhm.
Maybe I can make fun of Jesus.
Okay.
And yeah, like I think within 100 people who are Christians, randomly taken, maybe 10 will be very upset with me. 40 would be like whatever, and then
Okay.
and like another 40, 50 would be like, okay, go for it, man. We don't care.
Okay.
So I think maybe an example of like, okay, the test of the religion, like in terms of like, can it withstand like some criticism,
Yeah.
um
I don't know. Certain religions. A good example of this is multiple sects. Even Orthodox, Jewish Orthodox. It's encouraged that you're supposed to question your religious beliefs and that you're actually supposed to debate them amongst each other. It is encouraged that you're supposed to do that. Granted, I will add one massive caveat. You can debate all you want, but at the end of the day, you're coming back where we fucking
Yeah.
said you.
And that's yeah. Growing up Jewish, I feel like so I was never Orthodox, and I'm not very religious now, but seeing how the Orthodox community operates, they do question a lot within their framework. But at the end of the day, as Frank said, you have to stick within that framework. So they can be very clever. Like if you read the text, they're very clever and ingenious arguments that seem like brilliant, but I don't like that you, at the end of the day, are stuck.
Drop it and come back.
How many angels can fit on the head of a pin?
Yeah.
Well,
If
if we
that's
think
not a
about
loaded
the,
question, I don't know what it is.
Well, that
Yeah.
and Michael, that's just like Catholics, like or Christians in general, for 1,000 years in the Middle Ages and beyond, you had a bunch of priests and monks, coming up with philosophical, essays,
Interpretation.
justifying the existence of God, justifying all kinds of religious things. I mean, really, medieval philosophy. That's why we don't really read much of it. No one really gives it much importance.
Yeah,
Just
okay,
curious, who
But-
here?
But a lot of it is a mixture of Christianity and philosophy. For 1,000 years, Christianity and philosophy were very much linked because you couldn't do philosophy without Christianity, right?
Not to mention,
You
even
would
people who
be-
weren't even all that big on it,
So-
like Descartes, still fitted in there because they were afraid of being persecuted. So they're like,
Well,
hey,
he was at the tail end of that, but like go back 500 years, he would have been burned at the stake or beheaded.
Descartes was at almost. It almost happened to him. He had to move
Well,
to Holland. He had to
exactly.
move back.
Okay, so go back 200 years or 100 years, and that would happen. Look, Giordano Bruno, that was I think that was 1500. He was basically if I'm not
Burned at stake?
yeah, he was burned at the stake, and he was one of Galileo Galilei's biggest inspirations. And look, he said some things that didn't quite match Christianity. Like you couldn't say stuff like
Do you know his sin?
I don't know this. I read about it actually because I really admire that figure. But and we share the same name. But
He looked at the stars and he wondered if there might be other creatures around on planets around the stars. That was his sin. And he was burned at the stake for wondering if that might be the case.
you couldn't really say that much, like you had to be very careful with what you said, and that was just the reality.
All
And
right,
that's why you could do
But also
philosophy.
depended,
just
where you live.
just a quick question. Are any of you familiar with Robert Ingersoll?
Mm-mm.
You ever heard of him?
No, not really. No.
Okay, I'm gonna post a link to one of his speeches,
Oh,
Perfect.
and I think you'll like him.
I got to be taken off, y'all.
Well, yeah. If you wanna post a link, or you can post it on the chat or the group, David. Maybe that will be
Will
more
do.
accessible.
Yeah.
Uh,
I'll see you guys later.
All right, take care, Frank.
Take
Yep,
care,
yep.
Frank.
Bye bye.
But yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, well, you can, and I think if you guys want, we can end it in, in 5 minutes or so. But yeah, I mean, what we didn't really have freedom of expression, until recently. We didn't really acquire that ability, and the church was, they could kill you, or people that were aligned with the church. I mean, the nobility, the kings, everybody was Christian, and it wasn't like dissension wasn't really accepted. And the same goes for probably most religious communities around the world. I mean, certainly the Islamic community, but I mean, most religions are not very acceptant of dissension, and
Sure.
certainly not in the past.
I think if a religion is like based on philosophy, I think it's a good thing because it's ambiguous. You have to debate. You have to, you know, but if a religion is very deterministic, where yeah, you have to follow, you have to be like this, you have to follow these conditions. This is how you need to live your life. Then I think it becomes a more problem because if you deviate, then there's always going to be like a certain percentage of the population within that religion who will say, "Oh, you're going against the word of God," and there lies the problem. Like I can see that in Sikhism. I can see that. I mean, Hinduism is like one of the religions which is very philosophical oriented, rooted in Vedas, and nobody knows how to define them. So that's a good thing. Sikhism, which I am, is also very philosophical, but then
And we're like the United Nations of religions right
no,
here.
but the last saint described
Everybody has a different religion.
no, but I want to say the last saint described how a Sikh should look like, and my God, just based on that, if you don't look like that, or if you're not wearing a turban, if you're not wearing, not shaving your beard or something like that, you have a host of problems. Like there's going to be some fanatical elements which are going to be against you. Islam is the other extreme where everything has to be regimented. You have to live your life a certain way. You have to pray a certain way. And by God, if you speak against them, against the religion or against the prophet, God knows what's going to happen to you. So I think,
I mean, yeah.
in my experience, the more ambiguous a religion it is, better, man. The more
I mean, for sure, like Buddhism seems to be a lot more open. You can say more
Buddhism
things.
is like a philosophy. It's there's nothing defined about how you have to live your life or something like that. Like, okay, this is how what we believe in.
But Islam, Christianity, those are like hardcore.
Christianity is pretty hardcore, but Christianity has evolved. I think the percentage of fanatics have reduced quite a bit from the Crusades area.
Well, and the same thing could potentially happen to Islam. I think Christianity underwent a period, with the Enlightenment and all that. I mean, people have become, I don't know how to describe it, but I guess like that process we're talking about, people decided to come up with some sort of compromise, and it was a gradual one that, yes, we still have religion, but, let's throw a little bit of science in there. Let's throw a little bit of philosophy. Let's throw a little bit of, liberal democratic politics, or, Enlightenment politics. So it was kind of a hodgepodge and a gradual one. And I mean, you could still get in trouble, right? I mean, if you weren't saying the things that you're supposed to be saying, but we reached a certain point that you wouldn't get burned alive, and and it progressed from there. I mean, until very recently, in some places in Europe, you could easily get killed if you said the wrong thing, about religion, I mean, in Ireland, I think it was, very recent that, some people were still getting killed, because, and they're all Christians, but it was Protestants and Catholics are pretty much a different religion, well, everywhere, but.
And that's really interesting. Sometimes the groups that are the closest have more division than groups that are far apart. Like Protestants and Catholics sometimes have more division than Protestants and Buddhists, or
Well, yeah. I mean, they just want to kill each other, I don't know if they have more divisions, but that's the thing. That's a whole different debate, but religion has this potential, which is an obvious thing, if you look at history. People
They
kill
may
each
not
other,
have more division.
each other
they
over
have
it.
worse division.
worst division. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
Protestants and Catholics have been killing each other for not 1,000 years, but almost, like over 500 years now, or 500 years, let's say. 500 years of killing because of, relatively small differences. But yeah, I mean,
Well,
let's not even talk about Christians and Muslims, right?
It's like the Shia and Sunni.
Same thing, yeah.
I keep getting confused and forget what they're fighting about.
Or Orthodox.
But they're fighting about who
It's
should head the church, descendants of Muhammad.
It's
or-
very small stuff. But if you look at Orthodox and Orthodox Christianity and Catholics, I mean, also the differences. Yeah, there are some differences, but they're fairly small in the great scheme of things. And how many people had to die? That's like, you have to go back even farther. Like for that one, it's over 1,000 years ago. So it's people really like killing but people have killed each other over religion for a long time, and yeah, it's just a very divisive thing, and it's connected to the system of belief of religion, which
let me put it this
you have
way.
an absolute truth, right? So if someone says something that does not go along with your absolute truth, that is not only wrong, but that's a sin, because religion adds not only the element of being wrong, but also the element of being sinful, and which is the worst thing, right? Being a heretic is the worst thing.
One of my guiding principles is that the punishment for not believing something for which there is no evidence should not be damnation for all time.
Definitely.
That is punishment that doesn't teach.
Yeah, no, 100%. What I find really interesting is why, from an evolutionary perspective, if religion has all these sort of silly beliefs that like aren't necessary, or there's trivial differences, why did it evolve from an evolutionary perspective? And that I find very interesting. I've heard a couple theories behind it. But yeah, I don't know if we know exactly the answer 100%.
Yeah, I don't know if this is one of the theories you've heard before, but agent insertion, I can't remember what it's called exactly, but it's like better to, like, as far as detecting the presence of another agent, it's better to have a false positive than a false negative. So we're more prone to sensing the presence of someone else.
It's kind of like protecting yourself, protecting your own genetics against the other or something. I don't know. It's kind of very abstract, but it's like, it's almost like having very specific beliefs as a way of recognizing your genetic tribe and separating yourself from the other. I don't know. That's one theory I've heard. I don't know if that's exactly what causes it, but yeah, it's just interesting.
Well, I don't know, like from a biological perspective, but if you look at every group, I think that's just a human thing that we do. We create religions for a number of reasons. I think one of the reasons, like I was saying before, like you have to explain stuff, right? So with thunder, you have to explain, Like, what is that thing that is coming down from the sky? You know, people needed to know, you know, on some level, you know, there's always going to be someone who's going to show up and say, oh, that's why that's happening. You know, that's, you know, we don't like gaps, you know, we don't like very big gaps in our understanding of what surrounds us, you know, so we need to fill those gaps somehow.
But a lot of the wars are not over the big gaps; they're over the smaller differences in belief.
A lot of it is identity. You know, if you look at Catholics and Protestants, do they even know exactly what they're arguing about? You know?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not really sure they do. You know, if you go around Ireland asking what exactly the differences are between Catholics and Protestants, to start with, the whole Protestant thing, if I'm not mistaken, the Irish version of the Protestant religion is really just the English version, which was basically the whole thing started because a king in England wanted to get divorced to marry someone else. I think that's the guy. I think it was Henry VIII, the one that.
Oh yeah, I watched a good
wives.
YouTube video on that.
I think that's the whole thing why they're not Catholic, you know, because England was Catholic for a long, long time. And the Pope was just no, that's not going to happen, man. You got to stop, you know, this craziness, this madness. They created a whole religion so he could marry another woman. Look, I mean, that's how silly that is. That's really how silly that is. And to think that, you know, like centuries later, you would have people in a different country, in a different island, killing themselves over this. I mean, it's just ludicrous. You know, if you look at it from a historical perspective, it's insanity. But it's identity, you know, like in Ireland, I'm not Irish, but, you know, I've read about, you know, Irish culture, Irish history a little bit, you know, that was a big part of their identity, you know, and an Irish person would probably feel that a lot, you know, like being a Catholic, being a Protestant, you know, that also, you know, evolved to a point that, you know, if you're Protestant, you know, you're aligned with the English. If you're Catholic, you're aligned with independent Ireland. So it really becomes not very different from politics. It's a matter of identity. It's really just very similar to nationalism. It's not about, you know, something that God said, or, you know, it's not religious really. It's really similar to nationalism. It's similar to tribalism.
I don't think anybody here would kill somebody else because they disagreed on how many angels would fit on the head of a pin.
No, but we're not the population of Ireland in, you know, the 20th century. You know, I mean, people are still killing each other over religion today. You know, the whole, I mean, how did we start the century, right? How did the century get started? With a bunch of people getting killed by crazy people flying airplanes into towers because, I mean, who knows? I mean, I've studied that stuff. I still don't really know exactly why they thought that was a good idea, you know, but it's something about religion, and it's something about identity, and it's something about nationalism. Not so much nationalism, but nationalism, like the aspect of religions that resembles nationalism, because, you know, for Islamic people, that's something that is peculiar to the Islamic religion. It's different from Christianity. It's different from Buddhism. For Islam, you know, Islam has never really differentiated really between religion and politics. It's always been together, like the same thing. Different, but very, you know, the difference is very small. So, and identity is also part of it. So being a Muslim, to a large extent, is a matter of identity, and it's also a matter of politics. It's a lot more nationalistic than being, you know, from Libya, for example. That means nothing. You know, I'm from Libya. You know, it doesn't really mean much. But I'm a Muslim. I'm part of the Muslim world. That is a big part of their identity. And that's dangerous. You know, anytime religion and politics are very closely linked, that tends to result
That's one of the reasons that I'm all for the separation of church and state.
Of course. I mean, you look at the country like Pakistan. Pakistan, like when it formed in 1947,
India is another example.
about 11% Hindus and 3% Sikhs, you know. Now, current day Pakistan has about maybe less than 2% Hindus. Most of them either are killed or have been forcefully converted, or their daughters have been married off to Muslims, you know, again forcibly. So when you become like a Islamic state where religion and politics are the same, it's a problem. It's a big problem. But again, you know, if I ever go to Pakistan and I go to Lahore, my God, I would be welcomed like crazy by the people. Because they're the same people. So at a people level, maybe like things are just same, but at a political higher level, you know, like things become it becomes a little complicated. Yeah.
People get very confused. The general public, the general populace gets very confused with matters of identity. You know, I was thinking about this recently. You know, because religion is really very similar to nationalism, for example. Because the same thing that happened in India happened in Yugoslavia in the 90s, but it wasn't. Again, religion was kind of part of that, but it was a mixture of nationalism and religion, right? Like you're a Serb, you're a Croatian, you're a Bosnian, and if you're a Bosnian, you're also Muslim, so there's also that. If you're a Serbian, you're also Christian Orthodox. If you're Croatian, you're also Catholic. So religion was definitely part, but basically that because people had a different nationality, which, I mean, it's really a made-up concept in that case, or a different religion, then you know they decided to like kill each other. You know, you had to, in order to have that territory for a certain religion or a certain nationality, that basically meant like what happened in Pakistan, right? Oh, I guess we need to get rid of all the people that are not of this nationality and this religion. And then what you get is, you know, you get a genocide. You know, that happened in Turkey a number of times, you know, against Orthodox Greeks, against Armenians, against Kurds, you know, in a number of countries. Every time we get really focused on this issue of, you know, either a state needs to be of a certain nation or of a certain religion, things, you know, bad things happen. Same thing happened in Germany. You know, like in a number of places, and we really need to like move past these things, I think.
Yeah, I wonder if this might sound kind of bleak, but I wonder if like once a certain group grows too big, it starts to fragment into different groups that compete with each other, and then once it fragments into too many groups, maybe they start combining and assimilating with one another. Like, is that just an inevitable part of humanity? I don't know. But yeah.
Well, especially the first part of what you said, I think languages could kind of be modeled that way. Like
Yeah.
as people move farther apart, they start to speak different languages.
Interesting. But yeah, I would hope
56 languages in India with their own script. Like I'll be as much as a foreigner as you if I go to southern India, you know.
Yeah, I have a friend from India. Yeah, he tells me that his local language is like different from the national language. He said,
No.
and then there's also like
There are 26 different languages with their own scripts in India. Like if I was to go to South India or to Southwestern India or Southeastern India with you, Michael, I would be as much as a foreigner as you are.
wow.
Well, there are over 20 official languages in India, so that gives you an idea of how diverse it is.
Yeah, wow.
But yeah, I mean, but I do think it's possible for us to to do better as a species, because as we get smarter and we are making some progress. It's kind of like the stock market, right? I mean, it always goes up, but sometimes it goes down for a while. Sometimes it even crashes. I think it's a little bit like that with, and maybe this is too much of an optimistic vision of the world, but I do think that's kind of the trend in the modern world, at least. And stuff like, Nazi Germany, fascist Italy, that was kind of like a crash in the stock market. You went back to a really ugly way of looking at the world and looking at people. And then, starts going up again. And I think, Yugoslavia, another really not as big perhaps on a global scale, but, on a local scale, pretty big. Rwanda was even worse on a local scale, or almost as bad, depending on how you look at it. In any case, up there with the Nazi thing. And but those, if you look at those instances, those are always instances in which the people involved became obsessed with these notions, that, for example, nationalism was a big one in the 20th century, that you have to have a state. So look at how stupid that is. Like, that's a very stupid notion. You have to have a nation state, right? You have to have a state in which everyone in that state belongs to the same nation and speaks the same language and has the same religion. And if someone doesn't have those qualities, that person has to be removed in some way, either deported or killed, become some sort of slave, subhuman. But I mean, that is a completely ridiculous notion, really.
It is.
It's a completely ridiculous notion that we should totally eliminate from our thinking, because it's not even necessary. It's really just an artificial thing.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree that all these things we'd be better without. My only question is, why did they evolve in the first place? And that, I think, is a really deep topic that probably could be a couple hours, but yeah.
Well, that's a good question. Like,
Yeah.
do you feel like you're persecuted all the time?
No.
By no, I'm talking about like the Muslim world or the Middle Eastern world, There's a big narrative which is like, we've been persecuted by the West. We've been exploited by the West. Afghanistan has been exploited by the West. Let's get revenge. That is one such narrative. But that would be a fascinating topic. I agree, Michael.
Yeah.
Nationalism really catches up with you quick if you're not careful, and that's for a number of reasons, like, for example, and I think it kind of depends on the situation. For example, in Yugoslavia, for example, it was the whole situation of the breakup of the country, the breakup of Yugoslavia, things were very unstable, the dictator dies, and then people kind of like, I don't know exactly how that started, other than the dictator, long time dictator dying, but when these things like get rolling, it's super hard to stop them. Like in Rwanda, those things were not even real, man. The Hutus, that's what's so tragic about Rwanda, is that it was a complete fiction. Hutus and Tutsis are not even a real thing. They weren't like real tribes. They were made up by the Belgians to basically exploit the divisions between people. And they made up basically these two tribes that really didn't exist. And then people, the whole country, like all the Hutus killed pretty much all the Tutsis. I mean, which wasn't a real thing to start with. Like, how crazy is that? And it's just like the ball gets rolling, and it gets really hard to stop these things. So because it's very primitive, I think we have like a tribal element to us, and when that gets exploited in a way that is effective, that is efficient, it becomes really tricky. Like the whole, like if you're a German and you're listening to Hitler, there are certain things that will sound very appealing. The fact that, Germany had been exploited by the Western powers, which was kind of true. The fact that Germany had lost a lot of its territory, historical, that thing about losing historical territory. I mean, people have gone to war over that stuff for like countless times, just to recover territory that they have lost. And then the other side has to do the same thing, and so on and so on and so on. It's a vicious cycle, right? I mean, they're like, nationalism has like these trappings that people will get caught up in. And it's mob mentality.
I've also heard a theory that, like, from an evolutionary perspective, like there might be a resistance to sort of foreigners just because they could bring diseases that we don't have immunity to. And so like way back thousands of years ago.
It's not a crazy notion, right?
Yeah. Now today we have vaccines. Hopefully the next one will come out soon. We have better protection against it. But thousands of years ago, that was a real threat. If you met with a foreigner, they could give you viruses and diseases that could really hurt your population. So yeah.
50 years back and now it's a much more interconnected world, so.
Yeah. Now it's like when one country has it, everybody has it. So it's.
Yep. Or one small village in one big country has it, everybody's going to have it. Is that connected?
Yeah. So maybe that helps, but I guess it helps and hurts, but yeah.
But I think we learn quite a bit from these things. That's the good part about it. Like World War II led to the creation of the European Union, the creation of the United Nations. Like we've been the United States model of federation has it's a very peaceful model. Instead of having an empire that just takes over and you have to do that by conquering and pillaging and raping, you just get people together and people are just like, yeah, cool. We're going to elect these people. These people are going to represent us. Yeah, we're going to have like this place where our representatives go there and we all agree on stuff, like this federation model is like very civilized and very peaceful compared to, Roman Empire, which is not one of the worst empires, but basically any empire in history, like the Romans, when they wanted to annex a region, what did they have to do? They had to send an army, they had to kill a bunch of people, pillage, like burn stuff. There was the inevitable, rape and, killing of, civil populations. I mean, it was a much, much uglier process. Now we have, much nicer ways. Even like now there's a dispute between France and Germany. Instead of 20 million people dying, maybe we have a very heated argument between a French person and a German person, and they end up shaking hands. I mean, we've developed some mechanisms that certainly help.
Maybe as bad as the media is, maybe like instead of resorting to violence, like people just stare at the TV screen about what's happening and that just stops them from actually fight. I don't know. But yeah, just a random thought that popped in my head. I haven't really thought too much about it.
I mean, that's true. That's true. Most people will just watch the television and complain about the liberals or the Republicans. They won't go to the Capitol and try to hang Mike Pence,
I have spent many a night yelling at the news. And
that's
that's
healthy,
no one's mind except for maybe my immediate family.
Yeah.
Well, there you go, Michael.
I figured it out. It's good after all. Yeah.
Like sports, I think that's another great mechanism. In Europe, usually the way you settled national disputes is you would send people to war, right? And you would see which nation is stronger. Now you have the European Championships. You send 11 people to play against 11 people of the other country, and we'll see who's better at kicking a ball, and working together in a team to kick a ball, to put the ball from this place to into a goal. Like that is a much better way to resolve deep-seated national differences than sending 100,000 people to war to die.
I understand that, but my problem with that, I understand what you're saying, but my problem with that is that the more moral, enlightened path for humanity should not be determined by who could kick the ball best.
No, I'm just saying it's like a catharsis, right? Oh, if you're like, say you're Portuguese, I support the Portuguese national team in the European Championships. Yeah, it's great if they beat Spain. You don't have to go to war against Spain and win a battle in order to be patriotic about it.
Yeah,
David is talking about the might of a nation. Like morality should not be dictated.
Exactly.
This
Because it's the most powerful nation.
brings to mind, and I'm not saying it applies in all situations, but it should be considered, I think, and it brings me back to the Black Panther movie. This was
Coming back to that.
a society that decided its leadership based on a fight to the death. What?
Well, in Germany, they used to have trial by combat. Have you ever like they used to decide court cases instead of having a judge that people would just fight to the death. That's who's right in the court case.
And that was only if you're lucky. If you were unlucky, what would happen?
What?
One of the ways to determine if someone was guilty or innocent, according to Germanic law, and this was later exported by the Germanic tribes to all of Europe, was you would get burned by irons, and if you died from it, tough luck, you're guilty. And if you survive, you're okay. You're innocent. You can go free. Of course, you have a bunch of really bad burns. But I would prefer the trial by combat, even if I was fighting like a big guy. I mean, the trial by combat is better. It's much better than the hot irons,
Yeah.
I mean, it was even worse for the witches, man. The women really got it really bad because the witches basically, there were all sorts of crazy things, but one of them, you throw them into the river, and if she's able to escape, then she's a witch. Of course, if she's not able to escape, she's a person, she's okay, she's innocent, but then she dies, which, I mean, it's never going to go well for her.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we don't have Sashir to end it today, but
yeah, we don't have a music to end it, but do you guys have like final remarks? I've talked a lot, so I'm done with final remarks.
Yeah, I'll have to think of some more topics for next time. It's not easy thinking of good topics, but yeah, I'll start working at it and see what I can come up with.
Perfect. All right, so I'm gonna start